There's an article going viral right now about a woman who decided to end her friendship with someone over the fact that they were using Wegovy. Now, if you don't know what Wegovy is, maybe I'll just refer to it in its more popular term. Wegovy is the weight loss drug, also known as Ozempic, known as a GLP-1, referred to by many names. In the UK, they refer to it as the skinny jab. Now that we've got that covered, she decides to end her friendship with her friend over the fact that her friend is taking Wegovy. I read this article and I found it pretty interesting. I figured I'd make a video about it and get y'all's opinions on it too. I found that it had a lot of psychological undertones to it, the dynamics that we find ourselves in with friends, people, family, emotional enmeshment, and how sometimes we feel like we can't do things in friendships out of fear that they'll react a certain way. And I think this article is a perfect depiction of that. It was published by The Cut by an author named Sofia Ortega. Just to give a little bit of a backstory on this author, she's been open in previous articles about her struggles with her relationships with food and her body image issues, just to name a few. She also has articles sharing about her relationship with her boyfriend and their experience with exploring his preferences in the bedroom, if you catch my drift. She shares about his pleasure in what's referred to as feederism. And if you don't know what feederism is, essentially, feederism is a fat fetish subculture in which individuals eroticize weight gain and feeding. Feeders are individuals who claim to become sexually aroused by feeding their partners and encouraging them to gain weight. Sometimes there's a humiliation aspect to it, and they like when you get really messy. I think we can all think of TikTok videos we've seen where people are stuffing their faces, getting clean sauce all over their face, drenching chicken full of chocolate sauce and getting it all over their face, just to name a couple videos. Anyway, that's feeder content. If y'all didn't know, now you know. The more you know. So she explores in other articles his admiration for people in bigger bodies, as well as his enjoyment in watching them eat. She also shares about how their relationship is open due to her own inability to partake in his preferences due to her own history with struggles with eating and her body image. So they decided to open their relationship in order for him to find fulfillment outside, since she herself has those boundaries of not being able to partake in that sort of situation. The reason I felt like it was important to include this information is because I think it gives pretty good insight into the author, her relationship dynamics, maybe some backstory. I feel like because the article itself has to do with weight loss, her struggle surrounding it, even getting triggered by it when other people are intentionally engaging in it, at least that was my perception of what I was getting from that based on it. I just thought it would be interesting information to have beforehand as we go into the article and read more about it. So in the article, she shares about how she was dog sitting for a very close friend of hers. They were so close that she writes in the article, "Our friendship always felt faded. We met in an online class and got coffee after learning we lived in the same city, only to learn we lived on the same block. We were born the same year, 2 days apart. Even our height and shoe size were the same. We had multiple pairs of the same clogs, and when leaving each other's apartments, one of us would invariably say, 'Are these yours or mine?' 'Who cares?' the other would shrug. At the end of the day, it's her body and her choice, but it's hard when she feels like an extension of me." I think that last line especially shows how the boundaries were blurred between them. This really paints a picture to me that this friendship was like this. They were close. They were besties. Shared clogs with someone, putting your toes where other people's nasty toes have been. You gotta really trust someone. So I imagine that they had a really close relationship. Oftentimes, I feel like friendships like this can feel very intense. It's very much like, oh my gosh, we're fated to be friends. Everything about us is very similar and we think the same things and we like the same shoes and we live in the same place. I mean, those sorts of relationships and friendships, they feel amazing in the moment, but oftentimes they burn too bright and burn out quickly. And that's what happens when that sort of intensity comes into a relationship. It really shows glimpses into a lack of boundaries. They're sharing shoes. I personally, even if someone had the same shoes as me, I'd be like, but I want my shoes because I don't know know what you do with your shoes. I want my shoes. That's just me though. I don't know if I'm weird. So that gives a glimpse into their friendship dynamic and the closeness that they shared. And like I said, I feel like this sort of dynamic can often lead to some questionable boundaries, maybe even a little bit of codependency, but we'll get into that a little bit later in the video. Back to reading the rest of the story. So while dog sitting, she opens her friend's fridge and finds the box of the GLP-1. She wrote, "When I saw the box of Wegovy, my first thought was, it's for the dog. I slammed the fridge door shut as if I had seen a ghost or a picture of my ex with someone prettier than me. I opened it again, leaning forward. Wegovy, semaglutide injection, all lowercase as if to say, I'm friendly and approachable. Seeing a weight loss drug in my dear friend's fridge felt like being cheated on, of confounding betrayal." She continues with, "I stood frozen in the kitchen. I looked at the dog who was not on Wegovy. What now? I considered saying nothing, leaving with a tight-lipped smile, and then what? Ghosting her without thinking? I texted, Wegovy, you're not in trouble, but what is going on? When I looked up from my phone, the dog was standing on the kitchen counter. Nothing was as it should have been. I can explain," she announced when she got home. Mind you, the friend's having to explain about her own medication that the author found in her fridge, right? That feels like an invasion of privacy in my opinion, but I digress. As she continues, "The two of us sat on opposite ends of the couch with our feet tucked beneath us. I tried to listen, but it was hard to hear over the sound of the blood boiling in my head. I can't believe you found it," she said, laughing a little. "You're the one who really couldn't find out." I know. I smiled because I didn't know what else to do. I'm the worst person for this. We sat in silence for a moment until I told her I loved her, but I had to go. I left in a daze in disbelief. On my walk home, I had a brief but violent fantasy about breaking and entering into her doctor's office. So that felt pretty intense in my opinion. I have to admit though, she's a great writer. She really knows how to use her imagery. I felt like I was really pulled into that story, not gonna lie. I also want to state that I am in no way intending to be malicious or to be a hater. I really want to look at this through the lens of mental health, psychology, friendship dynamics, relationship dynamics. As someone who's studied mental health and counseling, I just find it interesting that we see these dynamics play out. So I'm gonna try to keep my opinion as neutral and non-judgmental as possible, but I am human and I can't help but to have this icky sort of reaction to what's going down and her reaction to her friend. It feels very controlling, very icky. And personally, if her friend came to me and I was her friend's therapist, I would have a lot of questions about their friendship dynamic and possibly even maybe warn my client about the sort of dynamic that it seems that they're falling into. So after her friend explained herself, the friendship between Sophia and her friend began to slowly drift apart. As the article goes on, Sophia shares that seeing the weight loss drug in her friend's fridge activated a scarcity response, in her words, and how in the weeks following the incident, she began to engage in a lot of disordered eating behavior and ultimately caused her to regress in her mental health state and in her relationship with food. After about a month of this happening, of her finding the medication in her friend's fridge, her friend invited her over for a book club, to which Sophia responded, "I'm really sorry, but I don't think I can come today. I know this sucks, but the Wegovy of it all is just too triggering for me right now." The Wegovy of it all is definitely a very interesting phrase. Like I said earlier, she's a pretty great author. So, as the article closes out, Sophia shares that although she misses her friend, ending their friendship was not that painful because it was an act of self-protection, which I get in a sense, I guess. Partly don't understand because one, her friend was intentionally trying to hide it, which honestly I can understand to an extent. It seems like she gets triggered with anything weight related, it seems, and with what she perceives as a disordered eating. Now that we've gone over the article, I've given you the gist. If you want to go read it yourself, you have to pay to get past the paywall on the cut, but hint hint, you can read it for free using a certain website that I can link down below. As you can imagine, the internet had a lot to say about this article. When I say internet, I mean Reddit. And I figured that I would hop in on the discussion and share my own thoughts because why not? right? If you got a camera, if you got a microphone, you're entitled to share your opinions on the internet, apparently. After reading this, I've had a lot of feelings to process about it. On one hand, I feel empathy for her finding the medication because it seems like she's still holding on to a lot of pain and trauma from her past and her struggles with disordered eating. It seems like it's actively impacting her ability to interact with society and the way that we approach weight loss, eating, how that Ozempic and all the GLP-1s are really shaping the way we as a society are starting to approach weight loss. I can imagine that if you have a history of disordered eating, it has a pretty big impact, or at least it's probably something that it feels like it's being thrown into your face. So for her, it seems that her ED has rewired how she views the world, and seeing the weight loss drug triggered a stress response in her. And ultimately that led to her reacting out of self-preservation rather than responding mindfully to her friend and maybe taking a moment to think about why her friend was even taking the medication in the first place. She decided to react, and we can really see her trauma response coming out of her. She uses the words turning feral and feeling completely out of control with food and eating in the weeks that followed. It seems that the situation brought up a lot for her. Even just seeing the medication brought up a lot for her. And ultimately, as we read, it led to her choosing to end the friendship. I've seen a lot of people on the internet calling Sophia narcissistic, controlling, and in a sense, I could definitely see that. I could see why we would think those things about her. But I also think this sort of reaction makes sense for the issues that she struggles with. Her reaction wasn't in any way rational. I think that's why it's hard for so many of us to understand. And while I do sympathize with Sophia, I can't help but be a little bit critical of the way she handled the situation. I also find it confusing that her boyfriend's fetish for seeing women overfeed themselves is in no way triggering, but her friend's attempts at weight loss are. To me, it just feels like a double standard. How can you view weight loss as triggering, but not view excessive weight gain and overeating as triggering? Sophia's even been able to see this double standard in herself in a previous article that she's written where she's talking about them opening their relationship up so her boyfriend can get his desires satisfied. She even says in the article that him dating another woman as long as she was fat wouldn't be as painful. I also want to point out that her friend purposely did not tell her because she knew it would trigger her. Not because she was trying to be deceptive, but because she probably cared so deeply about her friend that she chose to keep it a secret in order to maintain peace and order in their relationship. And reading between the lines of their friendship dynamic, seems like there's some interesting dynamics at play here. So something that raised a red flag for me was the way that she texted her friend saying, "You're not in trouble, but what's going on?" To me, that felt icky. That felt like a parent reprimanding their child. That felt like a teacher trying to get you to confess to something. It just did not feel right to me. Especially, she's talking this way to an adult who has complete autonomy over their medical decisions. In my opinion, I feel like her feeling the ability or the right to speak like that to her friend, I think it really shows the weight that Sophia's emotional state has on the relationship. Now, if she had kept this story to herself and maybe discussed this with her therapist and her closest friends, that would be one thing. However, writing an article about it is insane to me. Not insane. Let me use a better word. It feels like it's crossing a boundary. It feels slightly disrespectful in my opinion. That was something that happened between you and your friend. And what if she hasn't told anyone that she was on a weight loss medication? I didn't tell you for a specific reason. Maybe she wasn't telling other people. So writing an article about it and publishing it to a whole magazine, that adds a layer of absurdity to it. And I just wonder how her friend feels about the article. And while the friend's identity is anonymous, I'm sure there's people who are in both Sophia's and her friend's life that can put two and two together. And if her friend really was keeping it a secret, not just from her, but from other people, she basically just outed her and her whole medical history. What I really wanted to get into on this article, though, was the potential emotional enmeshment that we're seeing, the dynamic that's playing out between them, her feeling like her friend is stepping out of bounds and therefore the friendship needs to get cut off because you are no longer in alignment with my will. with what I think is right, like what her friend was doing was a personal offense. So for those of you who don't know, emotional enmeshment is when two people's sense of self becomes intertwined. You stop being able to tell when the other person begins and you end. There's a complete lack of personal boundaries that leads to excessive emotional closeness and a lack of individuality. When there's emotional enmeshment within a relationship, one person's choice or freedom of choice can feel like a personal attack to the other. Patterns of emotional enmeshment tend to show up in relationships where both partners have experienced shared trauma or shared struggles. Maybe they both struggled with disordered eating, or maybe they were the only friends they had within their vicinity. Enmeshment often leads to emotional distress and poor coping skills. Signs of emotional enmeshment are lack of boundaries, lack of privacy, emotional fusion. You do what your parent, family, friend wants rather than what you want, makes decisions for you, expects emotional support from you, or they're excessively involved in your life. Possible causes can be illness, trauma, other possible issues. It can be passed down from previous generations, and it can also be part of cultural and social norms. The effects of enmeshment are a lack of identity and sense of self, an inability to act or think for yourself, people-pleasing, fear of conflict, which we can see in the dynamic between Sophia and her friend. Her friend purposely hid her medication due to the fear of conflict rising, a lack of emotional regulation, feelings of guilt, shame, and resentment, mental health issues, and developmental issues. We can see aspects of enmeshment manifest in the relationship dynamics between Sophia and her friend. Having her friend step out of the framework that Sophia built for them ultimately led her to completely shut her out. If you feel like you're experiencing emotional enmeshment, it's important to recognize that it's happening and start to set small boundaries.
A few moments later.
I had to go get my daughter real quick, so if you hear little noises in the background, because she's in her chair right next to me. Anyway, to give my closing thoughts, I really hope that Sophia discussed this story with her own therapist and not just wrote an article about it, because I think it's very easy for us to be blinded by our own pain that we often forget to look outside of ourselves and to look at the bigger picture around us and to see that not everything's about us and it had nothing to do with me. Try not to be judgmental. I understand she was triggered, but at the end of the day, our friends are going to do what they want to do, and as long as they're not hurting themselves or anyone else, which maybe she did perceive her taking the weight loss shot as self-harm. That's completely a valid perspective, but I think if her doctor is prescribing her a medication, then we have to respect that. So do I think Sophia's a bad person? No, I don't think she's a bad person. I think she's a traumatized person. Has a lot of history, has not fully healed, which are any of us ever fully healed? Let's be real, because you can go to therapy for so long. And I was talking to my therapist about this actually. I was saying how I hate that I get triggered and how the feeling of being triggered is just so overwhelming for me. And basically she said, you're gonna be triggered. For the rest of your life, there's going to be things that are triggering to you, but the difference is you'll know how to cope with them compared to as before you didn't know how to cope. So that was discouraging, but I think ultimately we can't really judge people for their trauma responses, but we get to choose how we respond and how we react and how much we let it impact us in our relationship. So I'm kind of 50-50 on this one. I don't think Sophia reacted in the best way, but at the same time, I can understand. I have empathy. But just because I have empathy doesn't mean that her behavior was acceptable in any way. I just hope that Sophia's friend doesn't feel guilty in any sort of way, because at the end of the day, she really did nothing wrong. She's taking medication that I'm assuming was prescribed to her, unless she's a rich celebrity that just gets it. Well, even then, they have doctors prescribe it to them. So I think this article is a great cautionary tale for people, and I think it gives great insight into relationship dynamics and why boundaries are so crucial in any sort of relationship. If you find yourself in a relationship like this one, I strongly urge you to talk to a therapist or to any sort of mental health professional. I think therapy is very helpful for situations like these and teaching you how to set healthy boundaries that are culturally appropriate for you and for whatever sort of relationship you're in, whether it be your family, your friends, your partners. And I think therapy also helps us spot issues in relationships that we ourselves might be blind to. That was my opinion on it, but let's go ahead and look to Reddit to see what the Redditors' opinions on this is. The original poster shares about their struggles with food noise, ED behavior, and how GLP-1s have helped them from experiencing so much food noise, and even how GLP-1s have changed their perspective on overeating, and how to them they now view obesity as an obsessive compulsive type of issue due to the non-stop thinking about food and the compulsive need to eat. They also share their thoughts on the article and how the writer views GLP-1s through a biased lens due to her own struggles with ED. OP said, "I feel for people with mental health issues, especially regarding food, because you can't avoid food, but the urge some people have to see their own journey as the most righteous really gets on my nerves." Someone else said, "This has become a societal problem, unfortunately. People can't stay in their lane and just be happy because their happiness comes from comparing their lives to others and making judgments. If they don't perceive themselves superior to people around them in some way, then articles like this come about. It's sad." Someone else said, "I wouldn't be surprised if there is no friend, and this author is just trying to write something new about these marvelous drugs. Like her editor gave her an assignment, write the other side of the argument for these drugs. Everything is always positive, so let's troll some people." The magazine is somewhat cult-like in its rejection of weight loss, especially by GLP-1s. This is not the only article they've posted in that vein. Methinks the editor has an agenda. Interesting. I don't read the cut, so I really have no idea the sort of stuff that they post, but I wouldn't doubt it. Some people are just so anti-GLP-1. It's kind of sad, especially because the research is there that they work and they have worked for the past 10 years or so. They are a lifelong drug. No one's denying that. I think some people want to use that as an argument against them. Honestly, the author sounds like a toxic person. Her friends should consider herself lucky to have her out of her life. She made the friend's decision all about herself without even trying to understand her point of view. Yeah, that's exactly like what I said. She really just took it as what she saw, what she felt, and she made the decision based off of her own emotions without really considering, maybe my friend has a reason to be taking these medications in the first place. Someone replied, "Yeah, I was reading it thinking the same thing. What an unpleasant person. All she has done is transfer her compulsion to disordered eating into a compulsion to root out toxic diet culture. If I had such resentful thoughts and opinions about what other people chose to do to take care of their bodies, I'd keep them to myself, not barf them out all over a magazine." Word. Yeah, no, I feel that one. Imagine being this much of a main character that you feel the need to control your friends' decisions. I mean, I think that really goes into our society's issue with having ourselves be the main character and being so self-obsessed and self-absorbed that we often only think of ourselves, our emotions, how we feel about something, and we rarely look outside ourselves and use nuance to see, maybe that's why the other person is acting this way, thinking this way, feeling this way, because all we can see is ourselves and we're blinded by that. And last one I'll read. Oof. The author comes off as super judgmental and controlling. There's no details about the friend's situation at all. Also, the friend went out of her way not to tell her, and she saw it by accident. The friend wasn't lording over her or trying to pressure her or anything like that. The author compares herself to an alcoholic, but she's like the alcoholic who's mad a friend keeps a beer in the fridge of their own home, even though she doesn't drink around her or bring up alcohol at all, etc. I think that's a perfect analogy, actually. Yeah. Well, guys, that was it for this video. I tried to keep my take as neutral and non-judgmental as possible, but obviously I might have some slip-ups here and there. I'm not perfect. But if you feel like I missed anything, please feel free to comment down below. If you feel like I was too judgmental or if I was not nuanced enough, please feel free to comment down below. Let me know what you think. What are your thoughts? What's your opinion? Do you think Sophia was justified in her reaction, or do you think her friend dodged a bullet with their friendship ending? Also, let me know, have you ever experienced a friendship like this? I don't think I have per se, but I would definitely love to hear your stories if you have. If you're still here and you liked what you saw in this video, please give me a like and a subscribe, please. This is my first video ever, and I'm really hoping to do more videos like these and hopefully start to grow my little baby channel. I'm hoping to upload weekly, so if you liked what you saw, more videos like these will come your way. Promise, I'm gonna do my best. I'm a new mom. I just gave birth 2 months ago. My baby girl just turned 2 months. So I'll do my best to upload weekly and to keep consistent, because this is something I'm really hoping to jumpstart and take off. So thank you guys for watching, and I hope to see you guys in the next one. Bye.